Now let's talk about Jim Crow as it relates to travel. Okay, remember we've been talking about Jim Crow this week, laws that codified segregation, that codified separate but equal. Right, right, yeah. Now let's talk about how it related to road trips, going to see grandma. Yeah, driving across the country. Yeah, because it was very perilous for a black person to drive across the country during Jim Crow, because Jim Crow wasn't just in the South, it was in the North, the West, and the East too. Let's talk about it. Yeah. A black magazine writer wrote that the development of affordable mass-produced automobiles liberated black Americans from having to rely on the Jim Crow cars, smoky, battered, and uncomfortable railroad carriages, which were the separate but decidedly unequal alternatives to more healthy whites-only carriages. Now, don't forget that black people had to sit in the back of buses, and when they traveled by rail, they had their own carriages, okay? But freedom from the back of the bus did not mean freedom from racism and discrimination. Because don't forget that the United States Supreme Court said that Congress could enforce the Civil Rights Act of 1875 at the federal level, but they could not enforce it at the private level, right? So what did that mean? That meant that black people, if they were not barred completely, they faced restrictions and exclusions, they faced racism, and they faced discrimination throughout the United States of America when they traveled. Okay? Now, if they were able to use a facility, it was generally of lesser quality because it was underfunded. Yes. So what did that mean? Black travelers often had to carry buckets or portable toilets in the trunks of their cars because they were usually barred from bathrooms and rest areas in the service stations and roadside stops. Travel essentials, such as gasoline, were difficult to purchase because of discrimination at gas stations. To avoid such problems on long trips, black people often packed meals and carried containers of gasoline in their cars. And we can't forget that they needed somewhere to stay. Do you think it was easy for them to find some place to stay? Do you? It wasn't. Black travelers to Salt Lake City in the 1920s were stranded without a hotel if they had to stop there overnight. Only 6% of the more than 100 motels that lined U.S. Route 66 in Albuquerque admitted black customers. Across the whole state of New Hampshire, only 3 motels in 1956 served African Americans. And I can hear you saying it now. Well, I'm sure a lot of them slept in their car, and I'm sure a lot of them did. But then you come across the problem of sundown towns. Sundown towns were towns that excluded non-white people, mostly black people, from remaining in town after sunset. Any black people who entered or were found in the town after sunset were subject to harassment, threats, and violence, including lynching. By the end of the 1960s, there were an estimated 10,000 sundown towns across the United States, including large suburbs such as Glendale, California, Levittown, New York, and Warren, Michigan. Yes. Over half the incorporated communities in Illinois, which Illinois is fascinating to me. This entire state in the middle of the United States of America, which was founded on racism founded on the hate of black people. And over half of the incorporated communities in Illinois were sundown towns. The unofficial slogan of Anna, Illinois, which violently expelled its black population in 1909, was "Ain't no N-words allowed." Huh, yeah. So how did black people get from point A to point B? Unfortunately, some black people didn't. Some black people were violently murdered along the way. Who was it? It was John Alfred Williams, a black author and journalist, wrote in his 1965 book, This Is My Country Too. He wrote that black people have a way of disappearing on the road. But there were black people who did make it to their final destination, and they did it with the use of travel guides. Travel guides that included directories of hotels, camps, roadhouses, and restaurants, all of them that would serve black people. And the most popular guide was the Negro Motorist Green Book, which was first published in 1936 by Victor H. Green, a World War I veteran. And the goal of the Green Book was to provide an accurate list of information on black-friendly accommodations and to answer the constant question that faced black drivers: where will I spend the night? It was through the use of these travel guides that black people could more safely travel the United States of America, because they certainly weren't going to get any help from white people who were constantly telling them no or hunting them down once the sun set.